Hey Bauer, Ruckus Makers, Better Leaders, Better Schools. I'm going to start with something going back into the world of Danny. What was like Danny as a kid in school to Danny working in education, and what was the gap and what led you to want to be in education?
Right. Want to be in education is very easy to answer. Um, I don't know, maybe 14, 15. I'm in high school, right? I'm in high school. I'm in my backyard speaking with Mr. Brogan. Mr. Brogan owns the property kitty corner to us, diagonal, right? And his son, Johnny, fiery redhead, right? That I whoop his butt every day in basketball. Mr. Brogan very much is like a father figure in my life. And I just ask him, you know, I'm thinking about college, this kind of stuff. What should I do? I asked him, yeah, I really respect him, father figure. I ask him also because he's the epitome of success. He works at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So, trading funds and bonds and all this kind of stuff. They have money. Johnny has every Air Jordan that comes out. I don't have Jordans. We don't afford them, right? The first thing I buy with my teacher check, right, Phil? I go to the mall in Georgia and I buy my first pair of Jordans for myself, which is really wild. They had one of those epic Jeep Wagoneers that had like the wood paneling outside. I don't know if you've seen this version of the
I
car.
do, yeah.
They had a cell phone, like a mobile, right? Massive with a cord, but in their car, and he had like a Walkman and I don't know, he just had a lot of cool stuff. So I'm asking this guy because it seems like their life's going pretty well. He goes, he quotes me the notorious B.I.G. and Puff Daddy, essentially. And he basically says, with more money and there's more problems. But then he says something that's really interesting to me. He said, if I could do it over again, I would have, I would have chosen a profession that had more impact, that made more of a difference. I would have been a teacher. And I was like, whoa, because this is the guy that I think is like the most successful man I know. He said, I'll be a teacher. That's when I chose.
One of your titles or one of your descriptors is Ruckus Maker. You've got it actually in this, Danny the Ruckus Maker. I looked up the word
Yeah.
ruckus. It's from
Boy.
1872. It's not a particularly old word. Essentially meaning disruption, noise, disruption. What do you hope to disrupt in education that you were seeing needed to be disrupted?
Yeah. And so my introduction to making a ruckus is probably more like, I don't know, let's say 2006. Let's say 20 years ago. And I'm reading one of Seth Godin's book, maybe Lynchpin. But I've heard him describe, making a ruckus, like not that you're a kid in the kitchen grabbing all the pots and pans and just clanging them along and, just making this commotion and just being disruptive to be disruptive, but doing it in an intentional way, right? Because you see something that maybe others don't see yet. And so you're just sort of inviting them on a different path. And so to me, that's like what the whole point of view is, ruckus makers do school different. And I like to say, hey, that's reimagining the project of education, even within traditional constraints. And here's the most important part so that we create campus experiences worth showing up for. Because it's the privileged and lazy school campuses that just believe, well, they got to come, right? Like the kids have to, it's compulsory, or the teachers have to come, they get paid and they don't realize, I mean, this is a design thinking experiment. And like, how do you create an environment that actually adults and little adults want to thrive in? Right. And if you think about that and make that sort of a first principle of your work, then everything else sort of, yeah, sorts out. But if you just, hey, they're supposed to be here
Mm.
having fun, right? And we'll send them away when we're getting audited, the ones that have too much fun. Yeah, it's just kind of a silly way.
I was talking to someone recently about essentially like that schools to an extent have lost purpose, or at least
Mm,
to like the maybe even somewhat to the educators. But like if you ask a student, like, what are you learning? Why do you come each day? Maybe they can't even really truly define the purpose because we're sort of, as you said, you're like traditionalists, you got into the flow, everyone just goes to school. I remember like going back to even when I was younger, like not everyone went to college, but now we've got to the point where like everyone goes to like it just becomes an expected performative experience versus like what are we even doing at the school? What would you say is the purpose of education in the school setting? What is the purpose of school?
Well, just like I said, making ruckus and helping people see what you don't see, I think in some respects, like just the function of turning the lights on, and whatever that may be, but turning the lights on for each of your students and knowing that that might put them on a different path, that that's not necessarily the one size fits all sort of model. But I think that's a big one, just being able to dream big, like what can I become, and just sorting out the meaning of life and all that like deep stuff. And also there's the social component, right? There's a great social experiment piece where you learn how to make friends, how to come back from disappointment and people messing with you, like how to respond to bullies and, just really terrible stuff, falling in love, having your heart broken, all that happens within the school context, And I think we should lean more into that and help kids, sort of develop because without it, they grow up to be super weird, right? So, yeah, we need
Yeah.
this to keep surviving.
I was working with people who had just graduated from college, and it was actually a first time employees kind of experience. And an employer was saying like, "Oh my god, 18-year-olds, they're coming out of school, or they're like 21-year-olds coming out of college, and they're lacking social skill." And I
Yeah.
think that like, that is almost for us, like in the work that I do, that is almost like our purpose. Like, how do we reintegrate that idea of connecting and learning how to be human beings in that school environment?
Yeah.
What do you identify in your work with work with like the Ruckus Makers, with your podcast, Better Leaders, Better Schools? What are you identifying as like the misses, the gaps in education?
Part of it is just it's not necessarily a gap, it's that point of view of just comfort, right? We've always done it this way. And maybe the gap is a gap of like courage, right? To try other things that are different. And there's systemic forces, sort of around that because I do know at a systems level, some love to talk about innovation, taking risks and failing forward and that kind of thing. And then you go out and do it and you get disciplined, right? So that's never going to support actually helping education sort of evolve. So maybe one gap is obviously, yeah, of courage and creative thinking, curiosity. There's major gaps in terms of, obviously equity and that kind of thing. It's that it shouldn't be a political statement. I think it's pretty objective that you can look. This was true when I went to high school ages ago. I remember Oprah Winfrey, right? She did a news piece on some kids going to school on the south side of Chicago and some kids going to New Trier, which is a suburb of the city. And I remember watching that as a high school student and just being amazed because there was clearly one campus that had an abundance and had access to everything you could think of, and one where the the building looked dilapidated and was falling in on itself. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And these kids are coming to the campus with the same potential and the same, yeah, just future that they could create for themselves, but are they given the same kind of support and resources? They had the kids switch too, right? And so then it was like a cultural experience as well. Like, wow, look at all this that you have, and whoa, look at like you're going to school in this. How do you make it work? Type of thing. So that's a huge gap also. And then, I think I don't know why this gap exists. Maybe let's call it a gap of common sense. Like you read books about creating legendary outcomes or, leading world-class organizations and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not a researcher, okay? So I'm not going to say this is Dr. Danny telling you this. But for everything like I've read and really amazing people I've interacted with, the folks that seem to do really, really well have a very tight focus over what they're going to accomplish. Meanwhile, schools seem to love to add complexity and goals that have sub goals that have sub goals. Like, are you trying to get the Guinness Book of World Records of how much stuff you're just not going to accomplish in a year? Like, why are we? And it's just such a waste of time and it leads to lower morale. And it's just silliness. So, I challenge school leaders, like, how can you plant a flag on your campus and say, like, here's what we're going to be known for in the community, have sort of this legendary reputation. We're going to stop trying to be all things to all people, right? But for many school administrators, at least, that's a very difficult stance to take. It goes back to courage as well, right? That's a courageous stand to take. But here's the thing, like, if you don't do it that way, then you just become basically, I don't know that servant's the right word, but you're sort of at this beck and call of like, okay, we need this from you. We need that. We need this. And then you're just wound up, burnt out, again, not feeling like you're making progress. Well, yeah, it's because you're trying to do everybody else's priority. You know what I mean? And you've added like a million things to your list instead of being clearly focused on, no, this is what's going to make our campus great and how we're going to serve kids. So
And
those are a
there are
few
though,
gaps.
yeah, and there are really good examples. I've worked with some in the Massachusetts area that are really focused schools that are focused on, let's say, a technical college or a technical school that focuses on the trades. Like, oh, I'm going to teach this, or I'm going to teach farming. Like, there's a couple of FFA program things that I'm aware of, Future
Yeah.
Farmers of America, that really like say this is the focus I'm in. And that narrow focus certainly helps them. Right? It certainly doesn't affect them in a negative way because what they're not trying to do is what you're describing is going really wide but really shallow instead of
Yeah.
going narrow and deep. Like if you go too wide and too shallow, you're not achieving anything and you're actually probably pissing off everyone. So
Yeah.
everyone's going to be upset because you're not achieving the outcomes rather than achieving that for a smaller amount.
The other gap there, Phil, is just, well, I guess that's related to courage. I could fold it under that, but school leaders, probably educators in general, don't realize that they can say no at times, right? You shouldn't say no to everything, but just having some sort of boundaries around, the work and what you're gonna do. Too often it's just yes, 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 yes. Yeah, it just leads you to watering down and producing very average, on your campus. And then, like you said, the irony is that you're not pleasing anybody. You're just making everybody upset because you're just only okay at a lot of stuff.
If you were to if you went into a school and you were able to give like one actionable small tip, maybe it's the tip that you give to every client that you work with, what would you have them change in their school environment to improve the school environment in a very short-term way?
I mean, I don't know, figure out how to laugh more and smile more and play more. Maybe I just have fun. Well, here's the thing,
Yeah.
I love to joke around and this kind of stuff. My wife was telling me the other night, like, now don't make jokes about that, like this deep thing she just told me. And I said, well, it's how I,
Mhm.
handle the soul crushing reality of life, right? Is making jokes. But with that laughter and joy and fun piece, like I do actually I do contemplate death quite a bit, right? And not in a morbid sort of way, but just a reality that everybody has an expiration date. And so maybe taking this one little thing so seriously on campus, like, is it going to matter in a minute, an hour, a day, a week, a month, a year, 10 years, 100 years? Certainly not 100 years. Like, nobody's talking about what you're doing on your school campus in 100 years. Like, and so that zooming out to me is
Mm.
important. And then maybe you could laugh at some of just the ridiculous stuff that happens from time to time. So that's
And
what I
I
would say.
I think back to we talked about like educators that maybe stick in our head, the ones that are somewhat indelible to our memory, like we think about them a lot. There's a guy that taught me that he was emphasized joy in such a way that I'll always picture the classroom because the classroom was always
Awesome.
fun. And so like
Yeah.
so I think about that for myself. There is a legacy piece that you want to try to leave a little bit of a mark, but that mark isn't going to be through a policy that you make. It's going to be through the everyday showing up and laughing with students, right? Like
Mhm.
it's the engagement part that is like the part that sometimes is missed because we so hyper focused on the curricula or the testing or the outcomes, and we're not thinking about the everyday interpersonal stuff. Is that what you also witness?
Yeah, for sure, I think you were asking earlier in the show about, like, teachers you remember that were doing it sort of the wrong way and how that impacted me as a future educator, but, yeah, I think the bigger impact were the ones who did it great, and, how can I steal sort of tools that they had and integrate that into the classroom. There was Mr. Freeman, and he just was always telling stories, right? And then somehow he connected them to history. And it was like, oh my gosh, you didn't even see it coming, but you couldn't wait for the next story, right? And before you knew it, you couldn't wait to learn more history, which was really awesome. There was a lot of role playing in that class as well. And so I think like, getting yourself into the points of view and putting yourself in other people's shoes really helps the learning to stick, so to speak. But there was a lot of work in that class, and one thing I didn't steal from him, but it was interesting to go through as a student. He had an activity called Magic Chalk, and this was an AP US history course. There was a lot of work in big sort of packets to work through, so not always the most effective way to teach stuff. But the other thing he'd do, he'd call you and you'd have to answer a question on the chalkboard, and your chalk was magic because if you got that one answer correct, you got 50 out of 50, whatever, 100%, on the work. If you didn't all the work in that packet went up to the board and magic chalk was wrong, you got no credit. Like, and he would just like chastise you in front of the class. But maybe it's some like just that fun ribbing and that kind of thing. I don't know.
There's
I was
something connective
frightened of that
about that.
experience. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
but like there is something about like I just being able to laugh in whatever way. There's a familiarity to the idea of ribbing someone as well, like that kind of like joking with someone that only becomes fun when there's connection. It's bullying
Yeah,
if you don't know the person. If it was a
sure.
random like sub that came in and told you that, I guarantee you wouldn't enjoy him very much. But like it's a
Yeah,
there's a rapport
for
formed,
sure.
and I think that that's the maybe sometimes the other missing part in education is like the rapport that sometimes is built,
That's a
you know?
great point. I wanna connect on the classroom and then the school level. But Mr. Freeman, like, so when seniors, right, were part of sport or something like that, common for like the senior day, you give your jersey to a teacher that meant something to you. He was always wearing some kid's jersey. So he was making impacts, on students all the time. And that's the thing. Like I knew this as a teacher, like if I have good relationships and actually have a curiosity and want to know about my students' lives and what they're interested in, if I can make connections and feed them the curriculum, so to speak, through that understanding of who they were, they do stuff. Wow, imagine that. Now I have coaching calls with principals, right? And they'll talk about this like, this staff is driving me crazy, right? Why can't I just get them to buy into what we're trying to do? And then I'll go, well, Phil, can you tell me what your teachers want to accomplish on campus? Like individually, what are their hopes, dreams, and aspirations? And then it's usually silence, right? I said, well, that's the path, you know? Figure out what they wanna see done on campus. You don't have to do it yourself physically with your time, but maybe there's ways you can resource or just show an interest or ask questions, and maybe you do roll up your sleeves every now and then. But if you help them accomplish those things that they want, they're gonna do anything that you request. I guarantee it. Or they're certainly gonna do more than they are right now. And, they're always like, "Huh, haven't thought of that one." And it's like, that's the only one that matters, you know? So,
It's
yeah.
interesting, I find, like, I wonder if this is your experience also, but, like, typically the administrators who go into those roles in schools, if you become a principal or assistant or an AD, all these you just keep jumping up or whatever. Those people were never trained in leadership skill. They've just
Yeah,
been there longer.
yeah,
It's like and when you bring up those kind of points, I have a supervisor who always says this, is like, "When in doubt, give them your heart." It essentially means like if you ever doubt anything, just give them just be a human being with someone. More than
yeah,
often, it will actually work out in your favor. And the supervisor, he spends his first hour in the office going past everyone's office and just connecting. He spends an hour of his 8 hours, let's say, in his days doing that, sometimes longer.
mm, mm,
And when you ask him about it, like, wow, do you feel like it's a good use of his time? He says that's the best part of his day and the most useful
yeah,
part of his time. And so often do you find that administrators don't do that. So you have to remind them, like, just connect with people. That if they don't know who you are as a human being, they're probably not going to do what you ask them to do.
yeah, that's a great point. Best investment you can make in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Best investment. Tell me a little bit. We're going to just divulge a little bit. Tell me about Digital Danny. I've been seeing some posts that you've been putting about Digital Danny, and I am like fascinated by it, but I don't know much about it other than I saw a video where you were talking to yourself, Digital Danny, and sharing this. Like, what is Digital Danny? What's its purpose?
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know you'd ask about that. So this is really fun. So he's only been available to sort of one-on-one coaching clients and members of our mastermind, which is a weekly group experience for school leaders. So over the past, I don't know, it hasn't even been a year, since August of 2025, currently it's March. Yeah, 71 people have had access, right? Interestingly, the top user has had 1,015 messages in conversations with him. So, I have a tool available. I'm constantly thinking, how do I help more people, right? And as we were talking about, sort of empowering teachers, knowing what they want to accomplish and helping them do that, it's not always about like more hours or more work. And so I wanna work smarter, not harder for sure. And basically I figured, well, if I could duplicate myself in digital form, I could help more people. So what I've done in the initial version was only a mediocre thing. And even within that, the guy who had 1,015 conversations had 910 conversations with that mediocre version. Mediocre meaning it was plugged into my website, podcast, YouTube, scraping content, sorting it, feeding it back, right? When you ask a question. Then I work with my mentors who are infinitely smarter than me. And they're like, you're so stupid. Here's how to build him better. And so the leadership lesson that I'm sharing with your audience, constraints are a beautiful thing. So instead of having him plugged into everything, I actually turned it off and I thought deeply, okay, what are the three jobs for him to do with people that want to interact with him? Job one, think through problems. That's what I do as a coach, right? So solve your problems. Job two, apply a tool. I've created way too many frameworks and tools. People forget, like, what's this for? How do I use it? When do I use it? Well, now, if they're just having a conversation with him, he'll say, here's the perfect tool for you to use and why. Job three is to challenge the story because sometimes you sort of have tunnel vision or, fishbowl thinking and zooming out, looking from different perspectives will benefit you. Then, as I was analyzing the super user, that was his name is Corey, analyzing his chats, I realized there was a fourth job to be done, which is just communicate a high stakes message and do so in a way that it lands well, with your people. Could be a email, could be a memo, presentation, speech, etc. Maybe you're going to non-renew a teacher, difficult conversation. So that was the fourth job to be done. Then after I had those identified, I started going through all my content, coaching calls, courses I've taught, podcasts, etc., and distilling it down to its best stuff, cutting all the fluff, aligning it with a job to be done, tagging it what kind of themes it covered, and providing 300 word or less context to Digital Danny almost as cliff notes, right? So instead of reading the whole document I feed it, it says, oh, this is what it's about. Yeah, it'll help fill. So I did all that, processed, let's say 150 of those documents in just under a month. That became version two. Told my mastermind members and other Ruckus Maker clients about it. They said he's 100x better. So all that to say, what I've tried to do is basically digitize my brain and experience working with school leaders that want to do school different over the last decade and think about how can I reach more school leaders at scale. And yeah, there'll be a public launch at some point coming soon. Maybe late spring, maybe summer, don't know. There's a wait list. So if anybody's interested, myprincipalcoach.com is where you could join the wait list. I think, no, it's great for school administrators. If you're an educator, classroom teacher, wanting to be an administrator, be great for you. I could see a use case for teachers too, in terms of just like thinking differently about how they approach stuff. But yeah, that's what it is.
I love it. And if you want to see a digital visual of Danny with the mustache, everything that you can see those on LinkedIn. I love the comparison between your bio photo and then the banner at the top. It's like, oh, look, there he is.
Yeah,
It
for
was,
sure.
it was awesome to see. I'm gonna conclude this with a little bit of gratitude. So
Oh, man.
I I put it out there that, and I encourage people to listen. You're listening to a podcast, so this is like the perfect, easiest of the plugs you could ever do. But if you should be checking out Better Leaders and Better Schools. It's 650 episodes plus, right? Like this is you've
If you
been
say
doing this a
so.
while. I didn't count them individually, but that's what
Oh,
the
man.
interwebs tell me. But like this is like over 10 years. You've done, you over a decade of putting
Eesh.
good ruckusing, good thoughts, good energy to better education in this country and around the world. And I just want to send gratitude your way. Like I think that
Thank you.
someone said to me once that, and I always use this line, I repeat it often, but the critic is the greatest optimist. And I really like the phrase because essentially it means if you critique something, you care. I think too many people look at people, and I wrote this as well only because the definition of ruckus felt negative, and I brought it up at the start, and you almost had to reframe it to me. There's negativity to people trying to change stuff, and so it requires people like yourselves and other people who are listening and other people on your podcast who are willing to take that step to try to do something different. And you talked about it before as being courageous. So I just put it out there to you, Danny, that I appreciate you, appreciate your work you're doing, and I encourage people to check out the podcast and all of your work, and then hopefully get access to Digital Danny when it's available to you. If not, just to see Danny with an incredible stash. It's a
For
beauty.
sure. There's
So thank you, Danny.
Miriam hates it, but that's okay.
I was going to
You know,
say,
the thing
yeah,
is though, I've been getting into improv, as you know, I've been telling you, and, just like I said, more laughter, more joy on campus. There's a cultural value we have at Better Leaders, Better Schools, rule number 6, and the short version of it, the punchline is, "Don't take yourself too seriously." That's rule number 6, right? And if you wanna know the other rules, there's actually no other rules. There's no 1 through 5, right? There's only rule number 6. And I think mustaches look kinda funny. So I don't take myself seriously when I have one. I feel like the '70s Miami, version. I don't know if that's the vibe. It doesn't matter. That's what's going through my head. And when I step on the improv stage, I'm just able to have fun, right? But yeah, the look probably won't last that long. It's been about a month that I'm surprised I've gotten this far. So
yeah,
we'll see.
yeah. That's hilarious. Well, thank you, Danny, for not taking yourself too seriously. Thank you also for just the improv of this conversation because I gave him no prep. I
Yeah,
just want to put that out there.
absolutely.
No prep for this. It's a pure improv conversation between two educators. So thank you, Danny, and check out all of your stuff.
For sure. And the last thing I'll say, to the audience, Phil's going to be joining me again on the show. We're coming up at Better Leaders, Better Schools with just sort of like a fun panel type version of episodes, and I can't wait to see what we create there. And essentially, we're going to basically riff on if there was like one rule that we can make that all schools needed to adopt, what would that rule be? And then we're going to ferociously debate these ideas and vote yes or no if we're going to, approve them or not. We want the audience to vote on those too and give us feedback. So I think Phil, you'd be great at that. There's other people that I've invited, and I cannot wait to start recording some of that content.
Yeah, absolutely. And be sure to check that out. Check out all the socials. I'll put links to that when it comes out. So thank you, Danny. Thanks for joining us.